7:56. 7:56, we're in agenda item letter H. Superintendent recommends approval of the following items. We have number 1, approval of fiscal year 2012-13, an audit actuals financial report.
And I will have Mrs. Carolina Rodriguez, our district's business manager, do the presentation of the unaudited actuals for you. Thank you.
Good evening, Carolina Rodriguez, business manager. Well, this evening I present to you the fiscal year 2012-2013 unaudited actuals. And here is the agenda items. First, I will go ahead and describe to you the content and description of all the forms included in the report. After that, I'll do a comparison between the 13-14 projected budget at the time of adoption and the one right after unaudited actuals. And then after that, it would be the a brief overview of what LCFF, Local Control Funding Formula, and the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. Two important questions we must answer together before we go on with the presentation is, what are we going to do about tomorrow? And how do we begin preparing for that reality today? So as we go through the slides, try to answer these questions. So inside the report, if some of you got a chance to look at it, print, or read it, it's this report, and it has a narrative. It has Form 01, which gives you a detailed description of the revenues, expenditures, the reconciliations, and the financing sources that the district had throughout the year. Then we have Form 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on, which gives you a brief description of the activity for the other funds that we have. For example, adult ed, child development, the cafeteria fund, and other capital and non-capital project funds. Then we have also the SEMA report, which is a maintenance of effort form for special ed, which describes or makes a comparative of the 2012-2013 actual versus the 11-12 actual. And then we have the other CEMB form, which is a comparison between 13-14 budget versus 12-13 actual. Then we go and have the Form CA, which is the unaudited actual certification. After that, there's Form CEA, which gives you a current expense formula to minimum classroom compensation. On that one, for unified school districts, we have to have at least 55%. Calexico Unified School District met that 55% and above. We are at a 55.72% ratio. So we did meet that, minimum classroom compensation. Also, in the forms, we have the attendance forms. And since we had a decline in enrollment, we were able to claim or calculate revenue limit based on prior year ADA, which was at a 8,886.74. And then also in the packet, you'll see an LCFF calculator. This was given by our County Office of Ed, and it gives you the projected revenues for 13-14, 14-15, and 15-16. And also another form that's in there that's very important to look at is the CAT form. That is a reconciliation of how all of the categorical programs did throughout the year. How they started, the available funds, what the expenditures were, and what was the ending balance, either if it has a carryover or if it only has a restricted ending balance. And lastly, there also forms for the indirect cost, and then there's a transportation report On the transportation report, it tells you how much we're spending per mile to transport students. The state has a set allowance of $12 per mile. Calexico Unified School District is spending $12 with 46 cents. So we need to look at that one. And then there's also Form L for lottery report. The lottery report is a summary of all the revenues. The way we use these monies is, part of it is to pay for subs when our certificated staff is out on sick leave. And then the other portion of it is to pay for textbooks. Oops. So now we're gonna go into explaining revenues, expenses, and ending fund balance for fiscal year 12-13. During 12-13, we had total revenues of $73.7 million. 57.4 of those were unrestricted and 16.2 were restricted. It varies from federal, local, state, and then the revenue limit, as you can see by the graph. 12-13 expenses, there is a total of $73.6 million. And it goes into the different categories. You have your books, your capital outlay, certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, and then the other operating expenses. 80.44% of the expenses are contributed to certificated, classified salaries and benefits, as you can see by the graph on the slide. I also added the expenses that are contributed to other programs from the general fund. A total of almost $3.6 million there's an encroachment on other programs from the general fund. So we give out that money to the programs to make sure that we give out those services to the students. One of them being the most in special ed. There's a 1.8 million contribution for 12-13, and also for transportation, and as well as routine maintenance, which is almost $900,000. And this is how we ended for 12-13. Revenues, as you can see the recap on the slide, we had revenues, expenses, then there was an adjustments and transfers ins, that is one-time local taxes revenues, for a net income of $102,156.57. That is a net income. We earned more than we spent, so we did well. We closed out the year very well, and we had an ending fund balance of $17 million in the county cash. So now we're gonna go into the 13-14, what the 13-14 looks like. And here are the revenues, and as I said, I was gonna go a comparison between what the revenues look like at the time of adoption and how they changed. At the time of adoption, we had projected that there would be $74 million in revenue. Now with LCFF and the new legislation, that has changed to $81 million. You can't see it clearly, but there was a decrease in state revenue in categoricals. So we had projected $13 million in categoricals. Now it went down to $6 million. But on the other hand, the revenue limit, which will be replaced next year with LCFF, instead of $48 million, that went up to $60 million. So we do have a difference in revenue from the projected to the revised of $7.1 million for 13-14. I also like to say that 63.6 million of this is unrestricted, and 17.6 million of the total revenues is restricted. Can you go to the previous one? I forgot to tell you guys, but I wanted to tell you what was comprised on the increase. What's going on, or why there was an increase. There is a LCFF implementation, one of them. Also, you have one-time funds of $1.8 million for Common Core. That is also part of the increase in revenues. And then also there's, I already said, decrease of almost $10.5 million in categorical programs that were absorbed. And also in a one-time carryover funds of $4.5 million and one-time funds of approximately $800,000 in prior year deferrals. This is the 13-14 expenses. We had projected $77 million in expenses. After all of the revisions and closing of the books, that got increased to $89 million. And this is, it goes out throughout, as you can see in the table, all of the categories had an increase. The one with the most, or the most notable one would be certificated salaries and also employee benefits. Employee benefits had a 17.4 increase from when we adopted the budget to right now. When I started closing the books, I updated all of the new hires and also the change in insurance rates. That also triggered the employee benefits to increase. And then also the books and supplies, as you can see, there's a big difference of almost $4.9 million, and that is due to the EIA carryover and the Common Core one-time funds of $1.8 million. For 13-14, our general fund contributions to the other programs total of $4 million from the previous 3.6. And it's kind of blurry and I can't see it right there, but again, we still need to provide services for transportation, for special ed, so there is an encroachment on the general fund on these programs that total $4 million. The next one. Okay, so for 13-14 projected ending fund balance. Again, we have a summary of our revenues and our expenses, and there's a net decrease of $8.1 million. What that means is that we're spending more, or that we've budgeted to spend more than what we are actually projecting to earn. This will cause, again, a deficit spending of $8.1 million, leaving us with cash in county of $8.9 million. Deficit spending permanently reduces the fund balance, which will make it difficult for the district to meet reserve and cash requirements and remain fiscally healthy in future years. So this is something we really need to be careful with and look at closely as we make more decisions. Some of the budget reduction strategies and techniques that I like to present today is to make sure that we implement or that we move forward to improve efficiencies. One of them will be position control forms. one way to do that is through a NeoGov system or other softwares available, but I know that NeoGov is one that I'm familiar with. They have an automated position control system, also to automate time card calculations through a biometric system. That's also a web-based program where time is inputted, and at the end of the month, instead of doing hand calculations, it's just with the software. And then at the end, also implementing SOPs, standard operating procedures, where everybody in every site will be doing the same thing for the same purpose. And the other one would be to enforce internal controls, to make sure that we have inventories up to date and that travel and reimbursement policies are enforced. And that's just some of the options. The next one. Now I'm going to speak to you and give you a brief overview of what LCFF and LCAP, or the LCAP plan is. It brings transparency and accountability under a new system. Here's a timeline of 40 years of the old system. The 40 years of the old system has been a combination of court decisions, statewide, ballot initiatives, the economy, and major legislation. Prior to 1971, funding relied on the local property tax. And so at that point, they thought that it was violating the equal protection, and then they established the revenue limit so that they could do adjustments to the COLAs and make sure that every child was getting a good education. Well, now Governor Jerry Brown marks the next major change in education by enacting the law July 1st of 2013. The philosophy behind LCFF is that it's by the people, for the people, of the people, where everybody will participate fully and it would serve us fully. Again, just to confirm, past practice will now be a thing of the past. Districts do need to do new to succeed effectively July 1st, 2014. LCAP has to be implemented fully with all of the previous approval of committees, parent advisory committees, and also bargaining units. We will be meeting with them and making sure that everything happens and is in place by July 1st of 2014. Again, we must think different. Under the old system, we started with policy, then the funding, then the program rules, and then at the end, we had site performance and then the audits and the compliance reviews. Now, the new system tells us that we first need to have our community involved, that we need to have our local boards set policies, that then we have to local boards have to empower the schools, and then at the end, it's all about the students, to make sure that whatever we do at the beginning as a planning process, that it would be focused on the students and that it would bring student achievement. Legislation is now asking us that policy must be linked to performance under the LCAP. And again, we will be putting together parent advisory committees, having meetings with stakeholders, and everything has to be done through this process, or at least as close to this process as possible, and making sure that we're ready for July 1st, 2014. The focus, again, it's on student needs. So obviously, student data will be the one driving the funding. It should be an organizational goal to make sure that we manage data very good, that the quality of the data is there, that when we enroll our students, the information is correct. So again, everything will be going through CalPATS Census Day is October 2nd, 2013. And so at this point, it's just making sure that we classify our students correctly, that we have the best percentages, and that we provide, so that we have the numbers that we need to make sure that we provide those services and that we're in compliance with the LCAP. So what do we need to do to succeed in this new change and the things that we need to do? We need to make sure that we recognize problems early, that we welcome the new procedures, that we work together, parents, staff, administration. We are all part of the solution, and that we communicate and educate each other. And also, the one thing is to avoid the you go first thinking. We all have to have a part on this. We all have to do something in order to succeed. So even if you feel that what you do is not as important as the bigger item, I think that we are. It's like when you have a big furniture in your house and there's this little screw and the screw falls apart, everything falls apart. So we are sometimes the big piece on the furniture or the small piece, but we all have a part in it. So yes, we all need to work on this, and we need to work for it together. And that is all. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Any questions? Mr. Ortega? No questions?
You mentioned that one of the biggest tickets right now is transportation. And I know the subject has come up in regards to the special ed, but right now when I saw the graph of special ed is not as big of a column as regular transportation. And when we're talking about regular transportation, are we talking about all the athletic trips that we do, or extracurricular activities, I should say?
No, that is the home to school transportation. And I've done a little research on that expense through the administrative assistant at the department. And what she told me is that it's a safety issue, that we have, as a district, agreed to provide these services because some of the kids, the younger kids, live
Across
the highway. Yes.
And it may or may not be an issue, but I believe we had, before you guys' time, we had talked about it. And it's been talked about in the past that we didn't want overloads for that particular reason, like people that lived in Camacho Road, and I don't even know if they live there still, if there's families still living there, how many kids we pick up there and stuff. But I understand the safety issue, but to be $577,000 for that issue, I don't think that's what the regular transportation really is. It's the extracurricular activities, because that includes traveling to Blythe, traveling to Palm Springs, San Diego, LA, and it's overtime. The majority of the time is overtime, so that overtime is coming out from this fund, right, from the general fund.
The way it's done is that when they submit their request for transportation, the site should be paying for it through a object code 7310 or 5710.
5710.
5710. And reimbursing the overtime and the mileage.
Well, we know that doesn't happen, because there's no way a school can pay for all the overtime. I think what they're being billed is the mileage, and we had talked about also increasing the mileage, but because the majority of the day is special ed, you know, it's house to house to house. The school to there, we don't have school to home unless they're out in the outskirts. That's the only one.
I believe there are routes for in
Oh,
in the
it-
city. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's not home to school.
I think it's
to the
for
stop.
I think it's for non-special ed students that we provide transportation to. The other one, it would be that, yes, we do need to go back and recalculate what this rate is for extracurricular activities. The other option would be to go back to our previous practice, which was to hire charter buses instead of going with the regular buses.
And at that time, the schools may reject that for the reason that those buses are $3,000 to $4,000 each, you know. And we want to serve the community and all that, but we do, that is a department that needs to be looked at, because if we're still charging 2.25 cents a mile, and diesel is $4 a gallon, it doesn't come up. I mean, it.
I agree.
I mean, we're still working with numbers from 1980 and charging the same rate, and we can't do that. I mean, looking at saving into money, that may be one. I mean, I've always thought about special ed, but looking at this chart, I think 152,000 is a lot for special ed, but the other extracurriculars are what's doing it. And the mile span of Calexico is what, 5 miles at the most, from one end to the other. So, you know, we don't want that much traffic here in Calexico and stuff like that, but at whose back are we trying to accommodate? We're trying to accommodate on the student's back. Because it's not the district, it's the students that are paying for it. And not everybody qualifies for the transportation.
I agree.
So that is something that we may want to revisit as to that. And then as to the benefits, that's something that needs to be discussed also. What I understood was for 12-13, the cash in county would be how much?
17 million.
And then for 13-14 is going to be 8 million?
8.9. We started with 17 million in the bank. 4 million of those got repaid for the TRAN
Oh, okay.
in August.
Okay. So we had 13 million in reality.
In reality, yes.
Okay. So we're deficiting by 5 million, but yet you said we were getting more money.
There in the budget again. There is a difference between what's in the budget. What's in the budget is what we project are going to be expenses. So at this point, we're saying we're spending $8 million more than what we're earning, but that we can control. That we can control and reduce it as our activities are analyzed throughout the year, and making sure, for example, just recalculating the mileage rate would be one of those ways to reduce the deficit, because indirectly we would be earning more.
Yeah.
And then reducing it. So at this point, it's that we just need to be conservative as our spending goes. Again, there's 4.5 million EIA carryover that is budgeted, but that doesn't mean we have to spend it.
But then we should find things to improve the academics with that money. We shouldn't be rolling over that much money in EIA, you know, Title I, stuff like that, because they're there to be used, not
Yes.
there to be.
Yes,
rolling
they're
it
not
over.
there
I
to
mean,
be a savings. They're there to provide services to the students.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Okay, and just, you talked about it a little bit, but you could just go over it again, Ms. Rodriguez. You talked about how we must do things differently and think differently, or what budget reduction strategies have been discussed or are going to be implemented to reduce that budget gap.
At this point, we're in the phase of disseminating the information, bringing awareness to principals. Mrs. Montaño and I have been working together in setting up budget workshops. We had our first one last Friday, and Mr. Ortega attended the workshop. So at this point, this is kind of like our plan of action, making sure that we're bringing awareness to the stakeholders, and that also we're providing them the tools to be analytical about their expenses. And so that is the first initiative that we have going on. But as we meet with the parent advisory committees and with the bargaining units, we will be shaping those initiatives more in a way that are more concrete and more fundamental to how we're going to really reduce those deficit spendings that we have right now.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, for the report. We need an approval on this item, just H number 1.
I move to approve.
Motion by Ms. Duarte,
I second.
a second by Mr. Ortega. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have item H2, swimming pool demolition bid, award contract to Pyramid Construction. Is Mr. Martinez?
Good evening, Raul Martinez. In regards to the bids that we received for the swimming pool demolition, we received 2 bids. One was from Ratco Incorporated for a total of $231,850. And the second bid that we received was Pyramid Construction Aggregates Incorporated for a total of $77,520. One of our concerns as soon as we opened these bids was the big difference. What Mr. Jimmy Sanders did, he called Pyramid Construction to make sure that they were comfortable with their bid, first of all, and to make sure that everything was in order and they were still going to submit their bid. In these type of cases, there's always a red flag when there's such a big discrepancy, especially if it's going to be a construction portion, because we don't. One is the school district's doesn't want to put somebody out of business, and make sure that you give them a way out in case that there was an error in their calculations. In this case, there's a little difference here is because it's a demolition process, and with the demolition process, it's everybody does it their own way. And in this case, Pyramid Construction is a very big company. They bond for $200 million. So what Mr. Sanders and I were thinking, well, they're a very big outfit compared to Ratco that's not that big, so they own their own equipment and different ways that they could take care of it and save money. So at the end of the day, Pyramid said that they would honor their bid, so the total bid is for $77,520. Once, depending on the board, if it approves or not, then we move on with this.
Mr. Martinez, I have a question. So there, it is such a big difference in bid amounts, and you said you went to Pyramid to make sure that that was indeed their bid versus Ratco at over 231,000. Do you know what typically a project like this would cost, and maybe why a reversal conversation wasn't had, and maybe why you didn't go to Ratco and ask them why they were so much?
Well,
I mean, I just feel like instead of
Definitely,
asking
yeah.
why the lowest bidder wasn't going higher.
yeah, it's actually the estimated number on this was for $235,000 from Jimmy Sanders. So the 231 comes into play. Obviously, Pyramid was not delighted about leaving so much money on the table.
Do they know, I'm sorry, do the bidders know what the estimation is before they bid?
They do, and they come up with their own numbers. They
I-
do, and the bid's opened in front of everybody. It's a public bid.
Okay,
So they were both here when we opened bids.
Sanders projected 235. And the bidders are aware of this. So if you tell me I could bid 235,000 for something, I'm gonna bid 234.99 for it.
Or you could be a little over. It's just an estimate in regards to the number.
So it's the norm then for them to know what the projected amount is, or what, maybe in this case, CUSD would have been willing to pay?
Excuse me, run that one more time through me.
Is it the norm for, let's say in this case, Sanders to have shared that information and sort of said CUSD is willing to pay $235,000 for this project?
The answer is yes. Whatever number, let's go back to the number that we had when the board gave approval to go out to bid. That's a number that we have in mind, and
But that
everybody's
was
aware of
based
it.
on what Sanders?
On the estimate, Sanders, saying that, so everybody's aware of that number, and it's just every contractor, especially for a demolition is not the same thing as it would be for the construction of the building. Construction of the building, having such a big difference would mean what kind of materials you're using, what kind of workmanship, and there's a lot of different things that come up. With the demo, it just depends on how each contractor wants to proceed demoing, with what kind of equipment they're going to use and so forth. So the workmanship is not as much as it would be as a new construction, is what Mr. Sanders said. So therefore, when he made contact with Pyramid, they were a little disappointed that they left a lot of money on the table. However, they would honor their bid. They could have pulled out, and then the options would have been to either rebid or accept the other bid. That would have been something for the board to decide. In this case, that extra money is either saved or used for in the swimming pool in another capacity.
Okay. Any other questions?
The
From the board?
bid doesn't describe what work needs to be done, huh? I mean, I can see them demolishing the swimming pool, but what about the the underground piping, the underground wiring? Are they going to take that out too? Or are they just going to demolish the swimming pool and all the cement around it and take it and leave the infrastructure underneath there?
The answer is that there was a specification and drawings given to each contractor when they did their walkthrough several weeks ago to put their bid together. So in those specification, it'll let them know and specify that what needs to be removed. In this case, it's everything. Division of State Architect would not let us build anything if anything, any residues of the old swimming pool are there. So therefore, everything needs to be pulled out. In addition, in that bid also tells them as far as the hazardous materials that could be in there, which we do know that we have the fluorescent lamps is one, the ballast, and then we do have asbestos in there and lead-based paint. In it, incorporated with their bid was also to take care of that with a licensed certified contractor for that. So that's also included in their numbers. So that was all taken care of with the specification and the prior walkthrough, the pre-bid walkthrough that they had at the site a couple weeks ago.
And I'm trying to look for the change requirements.
Which
Or the, what is it? The change orders. Is there language here that no change orders will be?
It's pretty cut and dry in regards. I mean, there can always be a change order. I can't say there isn't. But in this case, it's pretty cut and dry because it's only demolition, just take it, take the rubble with you, and whatever you do with it, as long as it's legal, you do with it.
And are they covering the hole?
Good question. I don't know the answer to it. I didn't read all the specifications, just that take everything. I'm assuming they will, but I can clarify that. In regards to contacting the superintendent tomorrow to make sure, my assumption is yes.
I hope so, because that.
We're not gonna leave something that's a safety
That
hazard.
dirt is gonna cost us $100,000 to
We,
replace.
in regards to dirt, we do have a lot of dirt right next to Enrique Camarena.
Is
that
it
we own.
ours?
It's all ours.
Okay, I don't want to go steal
But
somebody's dirt.
my assumption would be, Mrs. Ruth, that yes,
Nobody wants
that
to.
it needs to be covered. They're not gonna leave a big hole as a safety hazard. That's my assumption, but I did not read all the specifications
Okay.
in regard to that item.
Hopefully, they don't think that we're planning to do the swimming pool there, which it's not going to be there.
No, it's not, you're right.
Okay,
It's gonna be further west, the actual hole.
yeah. Okay. Well, since this a low bid, I move to approve.
I think Mr. Ortega, did you still have some
No,
questions?
my
some comments?
questions were answered.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so, we have a motion by Ms. Duarte to approve,
I second it.
second by Mr. Ortega, and we could get a vote. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to board members' closing comments. Mr. Ortega?
Yes, I'd just like to thank Ms. Ambrose for her comments earlier in regards to the me retaining my seat as opposed to it going to a special election. You know, at the beginning when she first announced it, I was very concerned. Now, of course, it's you know, it's not an issue, and you know, I can concentrate on the job at hand, at what I was appointed for. I just want to say that I take this commitment very serious, and I'm very happy that the petition was rejected, because I think that it was, it would have been a disservice to the community, and it would have used monies that can be used for other commitments that, you know, we're discussing here. And I believe the reasoning behind the appointment was to not have to foot the bill for a special election. So that being said, I just want to say that I want to thank all the board for your support, and know that I will be working really hard to help you in the progress that you've done and what you'll do in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Ms. Duarte?
Nothing to report.
Well, I'll just start by congratulating Mr. Ortega. So I'm glad that that is behind us. I'm glad we didn't have to go to special election because of the money that we would have spent. You know, one of the comments I made, and you did give an update, Maria, in your superintendent report, was I wanted to get an update on the SRO situation, but apparently there's been some attempts to make contact with them, and there isn't one. I have a question, because I do see a police car at the high school, and I'm wondering who's liable to pay those folks when the time comes. If we're working out of a contract with them, they're here, there's no contract. So if there's no contract, it's my understanding that we go off the contract that was there before, and that one specified that they were getting paid through other funding. So we could look into what's going to happen when that bill comes, because I think we get billed quarterly for that.
Or we just send them a 30-day notice.
We can do that, but well. We talked about it earlier as well, as far as the checkers, and I'd like to request a report on that. I know there've been some health meetings that have gone on, and some conversations about what the board knows and what the board doesn't, and I know on my end we haven't received any information on this, so I'd be interested in knowing what's going on with that. We have a retreat this Saturday, and I know that the intent is to continue from our retreat that we had not too long ago, which we were talking about setting goals and the vision. I think a lot of these LCFF and the accountability plan are things that we should add to the agenda. On that, I'll close by saying that I attended back to school night. I went to Jefferson, and they have really interesting, really nice ways that they use technology. I was really impressed that we went to a kindergarten class and got to see really neat demonstrations on what's going on there. I'd really like to see that happening at all of our schools. It's Jefferson seems to be one of these really technologically advanced schools, and we hear it a lot. I'd like to hear the same about all of our elementary schools and junior highs, and see how we get that going. That's all I have for board comments. And at this point, we will convene to closed session. Do you want to announce?
Okay, we're going to go into closed session at this time. We'll be discussing, the board will be discussing items K1 and 2. K3 was actually earlier pulled at the request of Aguilar, our board president. She did state that she would like to hear this at a future meeting. Unfortunately, it had been printed up already, but so we will be discussing items K1 and K2, and then we will reconvene into open session to announce any action taken.